Hey guys, so in this lesson we're going to prepare our motifs to work on them in Illustrator. So what I usually do is I do like a sketch. I use my 6B pencil and I sketch the motifs either directly here, or you can even sketch them on paper, take a picture and then trace them on your iPad. And then I do different layers and I trace every single motif in a different layer, so to keep everything separate. And this is important because if you have motifs that touch each other, for example, there's a gap here in this leaf, and if I switch off the previous layer I can show you better. This is because this leaf is going to be on top of this one and this leaf is going to be on top of this one, or the other way around. But anyway, the leaves are going to be on top of each other. But if I do that here, it would fuse the lines together when I trace them on Illustrator. So I want to keep everything separate just to have that flexibility of working. So changing colors, maybe I might do everything the same color, but I don't know yet. So I just prefer to keep everything on a separate layer. It's so much easier to work like that. And then once I have the sketch that I like, so I trace these motifs with, I'll show you, dry ink. So I use the dry ink because it gives that look that is kind of distressed. So I can make this bigger. So it gives you this texture. And when you do the lines, you have this sort of broken lines. Now, one important thing to consider is if you want to color this in Illustrator with the bucket tool, you need to have actually closed lines. So you need to use this, for example, the technical pen, which gives you a nice sharp closed line. So don't leave spaces like that, because Illustrator will see the space and it will not let you color it with the bucket tool. But in this case, I'm not going to use the bucket tool, so I like this sort of distressed look. So I use the dry ink, and then once I trace all the outlines, again in different layers, I do the coloring. So these are all separate, so I could put them all in the same layer, but they don't touch each other. And for this I use the artist crayon, which again gives, I keep doing that, gives a sort of distressed sort of look. It gives you a texture. So I color everything in black because then you can just change the color in Illustrator the way you like. And basically what I do, I just do a new layer and show you. Just adjust the sides of your brush and just color in the shape, basically. And again, it's important to keep, if you want to use different colors, to keep this layer separate from the inside. So you don't want to color both in the same layer unless you are going to use the same color for both. In fact, I used one layer for the outside and another layer for the inside. And in this case, I left the outlines and the little flowers in the same layer because they don't touch each other. So I can still edit this separately if I want, because they're not touching each other. And that's it, really. That's the way to color your motifs when you want to use this technique. So you just color all of them. I'm not going to do it here because you will be bored out of your wits just looking at me coloring this, but that's how you do. So one layer you do the outside, then you hit the plus sign, another layer, and you do the inside. Now, one thing I do actually when I color different layers but they touch each other, it's good to dim one of the layers that is already done. So you put the opacity down, and what that lets you do is lets you see where you color. So if you go on the other layer, you will see it here, and you can just get rid of the excess color. So that's another trick. Just remember to bring this back when you send your file to yourself. And this is the next step. So you have all your layers selected. And what you do next is go to the little wrench tool and go to share, and you share it as a PSD, because that way you will keep all your layers separate when you open it in Illustrator, and you can work with it as you like. If you send it as a JPEG, it would flatten your image and the layers would be lost. So don't send it as a JPEG unless you want to send each layer separately. So switch all the layers off and just send one layer at the time. But you would have to send all these different emails. If it's a big file, you might have to do it like that. But if it's small enough, you just send it as a PSD to your email and then open it with Illustrator. If you have a Mac, you can use AirDrop, which I think is much easier and quicker. But otherwise, this is the way I normally do it. Some people might use Dropbox as well. That's another option. So whichever way you like, just send the file to yourself as long as you keep the layers separate. So now we can go to Illustrator and trace the motifs.